I'm using Liquitex acrylic primer gesso to put down a layer on these patty pans and little pie plates so that I can oil paint on top of them. Painting directly on the tin isn't necessarily a problem, but it doesn't give you a good ground that has a little bit of tooth in it. So these, I'm not going to paint all of these right now. I'm just preparing some for a future time. I'm going to just paint 2, and I'll show you which ones in a minute. I've just speeded this up maybe 3 or 4 times the amount. Actually 5 times, come to think of it, because the process of painting small is laborious. And I paint in layers, so I have to let the oil paint dry in between those layers. I'm going to paint this particular pastry form for a tart, and I've got a particular scene that I want to put on this one too. So this has the removable bottom in it, and it's not an antique. It's old, I mean it's vintage, but it's not an antique. And I have this little pan right here that I'm also going to paint in. And the others I'll put aside for another time. And I actually make a mixture, a medium, that is 2 parts Damar varnish and 1 part linseed oil. And I have this old palette, and I'm just going to turn it over because it's really old. It's probably 30 years old. But it's just the right size to put on the table. And I'm using student-grade oils here from Utrecht and Van Gogh. These are not the grade oils that I use when I normally do a painting. I buy Mussini paints by Schminke, and they're very, very expensive, and I'm not going to use those for these little ornaments. These are student-grade. When I was teaching, these are the paints that I recommended my students buy and not invest hundreds and hundreds of dollars into the better oil paints until they were sure that was what they wanted to do for a living, be an artist, and also gain some experience. Now I went ahead and sketched with colored pencil and with a regular pencil the little image that I'm going to paint on this particular pan. And I'm going to lay out my colors on the palette. And I used to have my students label their palettes and then put the colors down. I'm not actually going to observe that here. I don't tend to do that. I did it for people who were, just learning and learning how to mix colors. But I have my own process, and it doesn't involve the same order every single time. I do tend to group colors together, but not always. And I had to use a pair of pliers to open these up because I bought these student grade paints some time ago because I was doing a wall mural in my house, and I didn't want to use they come in these big studio tubes, so it's a much cheaper alternative if you're going to paint a mural. And for doing ornaments and things like that, I would rather use the less expensive oils. I'm going to begin by putting in the background. But I do prefer oil paint to acrylic painting. Acrylics have their place for me, but they just don't have the intensity of color that oil paints have. And the ability to mix the paints, for me anyway, is a much better process because you have a long time before it dries. Now for some people that's kind of a problem, and in some circumstances that's a problem too. And oils have to have certain surfaces that you use, otherwise they won't dry at all. You can't put oil on plastic. It just won't dry. It'll never dry. You can wait 100 years and it's just not going to dry. And even if you put gesso on it, sometimes it won't dry. So acrylics are really handy for painting plastics and wood and a lot of other things too. And I use a lot of acrylics. But I don't tend to use black either. I mix my own color to make a very dark shade, which is sap green and alizarin crimson, which is an extremely dark brown. That is if you're using really good oil paint. In these student grade paints, however, the sap green and the alizarin crimson are just not strong enough to make a near black color, so I will have to use ivory black for a little bit of it. But I don't tend to mix black into my paint pigments. It'll muddy up the colors. A lot of people, they just use black constantly to tone it down or to make different shades, and that's a mistake. Black will muddy up the colors and you'll get something that looks dirty looking instead of brilliant. But maybe you want that. I don't know. There are certain circumstances where that's desirable, I suppose. I'm using titanium white. When I'm doing a painting, I tend to use more transparent colors. Zinc white is more transparent, but in these cheaper oil paints, zinc white is kind of a problem. I'm using Indian yellow, which is transparent, ochre, yellow ochre, chrome yellow, and other various colors like ultramarine and manganese blue, and also rose madder. But again, in these cheaper oil paints, the pigments are not as strong, but you can still get some pretty good colors, and you can still achieve a kind of brilliance with it. So I'm just going over this. I tend to paint from dark to light most of the time, and then I go over it again to enhance dark areas and light areas last. So these are a couple little birds, and they're sitting on a couple of twigs of holly and mistletoe, and you'll see that. And the brown portion, that sienna brown portion, is actually going to be eventually painted with a gold chrome paint. And I like to use a reddish ground when I do that. I think if you use these videos, nobody really wants to sit through hours and hours of somebody oil painting. But you use it as a background, for doing something else, and occasionally take a look at the video. That's what I do when I have very long videos that I like to watch. If they're not movies, I'll put them on and I'll do something else like crochet or knit or sew, and I will watch the video and listen to it, and I still get a lot out of it. So that's kind of what I hope people will do here and have a relaxing experience. And there I'm just actually using a little black to put around the wings and the tips of the wings, because as I said, the combination that I usually use, which is sap green again and alizarin crimson, just isn't dark enough. I'm also recording this very, very early in the morning, and my throat is a little bit scratchy, so I apologize for that if I kind of lose my voice here and there. I'm just going in and enhancing the branches and the beaks of the birds. I view oil painting as a kind of sculpture as well. You're building up a form from the background up and making it have some kind of substance and shape, at least for me, unless you're doing absolute modernistic art, which anything goes then, I guess. And I'm just pulling this image out of my head, per se. There is a Christmas card out there I've seen on the internet that looks very like this, and I don't know where it is. I saw it and looked at it, and said, well, I'm going to do that image or something close to it. And so that's what I'm doing. I don't have an exact photographic memory, but I have a very good image memory and a very good memory for color, but it's not precise. And I can often paint from memory because of that. But if I go back and find an image later, like when I'm doing one of these decorations, I'll see how different it is, but it's similar. My original paintings are not done from things that I see on the internet. I do those out of my imagination almost entirely, and sometimes I'll use my own photographs as references. But that's a whole different type of work that I do. I don't limit myself to just one thing. A lot of painters will just do the same type of painting over and over and over again, and that's fine. A lot of galleries like that sort of thing. They, for some reason, feel that there's a consistency there, probably for monetary reasons. For me, I like to do a lot of different types of artwork, and I like to stretch myself. I like to do things that look kitschy. I like to do fine art. I like to do photography. I like to do doll art, sewing, sculptures in wool. What I'm doing is I'm showing you the fine paintbrushes that I'm using. I use the finest that I can, and I like the real sable brushes. Acrylic paint brushes are different than oil. With oil, you want to use natural bristles, from the stiff boar bristles to the sable bristles, because the synthetic ones don't last very long. They can actually kind of melt. But you really have to be careful to clean your brushes every single time and not let pigments dry into them. You'll ruin them. I know sometimes you'll forget. You'll set your brushes aside and walk away from them, and I've done that. But I'm usually very careful, because I have brushes that I've had for 40 years that I'm still using. Yes, 40 years. And I have a lot of paintbrushes, and I use a lot of brushes when I paint. I pick up a new brush with new colors often, rather than clean them, because I don't like to use turpentine. I don't like the smell of it. There is turpentine in most oil paints, but there's not that much, and it can be a fire hazard too when you're working. If you forget to take your cloths and immerse them in water right away, you can actually start fires pretty easily. And I don't like the dull finish that too much turpentine gives when you thin paint with it. I use Damar varnish and linseed oil, as I mentioned earlier. 1 part linseed oil and 2 parts Damar varnish, actually. Sometimes I reverse that, but right now I'm using it 1 part linseed oil and 2 parts Damar varnish. Now I'm going to make another little sketch, again out of memory, what I think this Christmas card looked like. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to get it right, but I have this memory of how it looked. So I'm just going to sketch it in, and again, 2 chimneys and a few windows out in front, and snow on the roof, and 1 window coming out, dormer. It had a look about it that was sort of a Tudor look, sort of. And there was a lake in front. That's all I can remember. And I think there was a great big pine tree off to the left, so we'll see. Anyway, and hills in the background. So I'm going to just draw it out how I remember it, and maybe sometime I'll try to look for the picture and compare them and see how close I got with my memory. And I'm just going to put some background in first. Background of a lake in the front, or pond, or whatever. and the snow-covered hills in the background. And some of the shadows I'll put in first. I do keep the paint thinner at this point with more of a wash. And then as I build up the light colors will have more substance to them. They'll be thicker. But that'll come later. There's a fence, there's stone fence or a gate. Wooden fence, I can't remember exactly, all around the whole little scene, but I'm putting in a wooden one because it just seems like there was a wooden fence in front of the house. And some kind of a little dock and a big pine tree, I think. But we'll just go with the big pine tree off to the left and some bushes off to the right. And I'll have to put some clouds in at some point too. I'm not going to put smoke out of the chimneys though, because I think there was smoke out of the chimneys, but it just seems to, it just doesn't seem like enough space to me, and it might kind of muddy it up. It get confused with the clouds. So we'll have to imagine that little house is very early in the morning when the fires have calmed down, before the people have gotten up. Okay, now I'm going to use some more yellows and enhance the birds a little bit, and put some more orange in their breasts. And I'm using rose madder and Indian yellow to do this, mixed with a little bit of titanium white. This one bird gave me a little trouble because its wings are spread a little bit and there's a top view of the head. And for some reason I had a hard time envisioning that, but I eventually got it. I kept working it and working it. The other bird is sitting more upright and behind the front bird. So I needed to get those wings to detach from the other bird. And again, I'm putting a little bit of black in, being careful not to mix it with the other colors, just putting it where it needs it, on the eye, on the tip of the beak, around the edges of the wings, and even on some of the branches, the lower shadows of the branches of the plants that are in the picture. I'm not mixing black with any other colors though. I just don't want it to get muddy looking. The other decorations I've made, I've actually just printed out images from vintage postcards and Christmas cards and glued them in. And that's how I've done it in the past. I've done very little oil painting of ornaments, so I thought this would be more of an experiment. and see how it turned out. And I'll do some more before Christmas starts, because I like to decorate at Christmas. We do Christmas big around our house, and we usually have a pretty big dinner and invite lots of people. I don't know what will happen this year. There's been a lot of our friends who have been ill, and family members too, so we'll see. Hopefully by Christmas things will smooth out a little bit. The nice thing about oils is when you make a mistake, it isn't as hard to cover it. When you make a mistake when you're doing a watercolor, well, that can be a real problem. And those of you who are watercolorists out there know what I'm talking about. I do a lot of watercolor as well, so. And I work with gouache. I do, like I said, use acrylics. But oil paints are my absolute favorite medium. I haven't done any really truly miniature paintings yet. I would like to do some for my dollhouse, but I do have a little bit of a problem with my eyes. I have cataracts, but they're not ready to be operated on. So I have a little bit of a problem distinguishing between navy blue and black and that kind of a thing. And, it's just a result of getting older. And they said that, well, you have to wait till they get to a certain point before you can have them operated on. So I have to wait. So painting real small like this is a little bit of a problem for me, but if I go much smaller, it may be difficult. But I suppose I could use a magnifying glass. That might help. So I would like to do some little paintings. I have some paintings that I showed in a video previously, but they're shrunken from big paintings down and made into small ones and printed off on the printer. And that was a group of paintings that I did several years ago. I was experimenting with American folk art, and I haven't done any since. But I did do 5 American art, folk art paintings in oils, and they were fun. And I think I'm going to put those in my little house, but I'm going to shrink those down as printables as well. So, but I would like to do some actual little paintings, maybe some landscapes. So we'll see. I'm just going around touching the edges up and the foliage. And I have to lighten up the birds a little bit. Put in the highlights and the feathers. I'm using a little mixture of yellow ochre and titanium white. And now I'm going to work on the house again. There's many days in between these videos because I have to wait for it to dry. You just don't notice it because I've speeded this up and, pasted it back together. But I had to wait for these both to dry before I could continue, and I've had to do that several times. And now I'm going to finish the sky, work on the clouds. This particular little painting of Christmas doesn't have all the bright Christmassy colors in it. It's a landscape with a building in it, basically. And so I'm not sure how I'm going to bling this up afterwards. I'll have to see, decorate it, because I still want it to look like an ornament. And it just happens to be an ornament I've used oil paints with, that's all. So I'm not looking at this like great art or anything. So I want it to be decorative. A lot of artists really despise that word decorative, but decorative has its place, and I keep them separate. And this is decorative. Also, if you have any questions about painting and mediums for oil, I'm very willing to answer any of your questions. I've been painting for many, many years. I started painting when I was 9 years old. My mother and father bought me an oil painting kit from Winsor & Newton, and I began to paint oil paintings at 9 years old. Yep, 9. Now, they weren't very good, but they weren't too bad, actually. The first thing I painted for my mom I copied one of those big-eyed girl paintings I found in a magazine, and she was thrilled with it. And then I painted a picture for my dad that was a Viking ship with one little Viking in it and a sword. I don't know what happened to those paintings. And then after that, I painted lots and lots of horses. I was always painting horses, and I got really good at it at a very early age because I was so fixated on horses. And then later on, I began to do portraits. I studied under Daniel Green, and I actually did portraits and got paid for them and flew all over the place to paint people's portraits. But I gave that up because I am one of those types of people that I'm an honest painter, and a lot of the people, when I painted the way they really looked, they weren't happy. They had an image of themselves that wasn't quite true, and so they would want me to change the paintings, and sometimes I would and sometimes I wouldn't. But I decided that it was just something I didn't want to do anymore, and I did that for quite a while. And then I went off into more modern type art where I did installation art, and I did these great big rooms filled with, some of them were filled with a certain type of painting, or they were filled with sound and paintings and videos and that kind of thing. But and then I taught for 11 years, almost 12 years. I taught studio art. I also taught Photoshop and Illustrator and digital work too, so I did branch off into that. And I retired from teaching, I think it was 2011. It was my last class. I also do a lot of book illustration, and I write children's books, and I illustrate my own children's books. And there are examples in my shorts of some of the things that I've done. Now I'm just going in and putting more details in. It's a big difference in between the way the color looks with this particular lighting and the lighting before. Lighting is very important when you're painting. I tend to use natural lighting when I'm doing my big paintings. I have a north-facing group of windows and a room that has a very high ceiling that it's actually where I do my real studio work. And but here I'm actually at a desk, and I have several types of lights. And although some of them mimic real, light balanced skylight or daylight, it really never does quite do that. And there's always ambient light from other directions. So you can really come up with different colors because of the light reflection. And so it's best to paint under natural lighting. But for something like an ornament, I'm not that concerned about it. I'm just going to try to get those windows in. I think this house was partially log and partially stucco or something. I don't really remember from the picture, but that's what I'm making it, almost like a log picture. I have to readjust those windows, so one of them isn't placed quite right, but we'll see. I'm going to build up the snow a bit. And I did put the gold paint on the birds, but I missed a little portion of film that got cut out, and I don't know if I deleted it or I didn't, whatever happened to it. But I actually used a chrome marker and went over the oil paint on the bird ornament, and you'll see that later. But you won't see me doing it because it got deleted. I think it did get deleted. And this is the frozen pond, or partially frozen pond, that I'm painting. It's like a little dock out there. Just putting a little bit of sap green on that pine tree so that and a little sap green and manganese blue into the pond. More snow. This is where I build it up, where you'll see some texture with the paint, some impasto with the snow on the tree and on the roof and on the ground and in the bushes, where I make it thick. Okay, you can see where I put the gold. Now I'm actually showing you that picture of the mica. The one on the left that had that one right there, that was a big disappointment. That's not real mica. I bought that on Amazon. This other one in the blue package is real mica. And they advertised it in a bottle. It came in a bag. When I opened it, it wasn't real mica. It's made in China. Don't buy it. It's on Amazon. The stuff that I have on the right there, that's the real thing. And I'm running out of it, unfortunately. And I don't know where to buy it. I've looked all over for it. Okay, now I'm going to trim this up a bit. The glue's got to dry where I put that mica around the edges, and I'm going to put some trim. It's just some, it's a kind of pipe cleaner that has a Christmas tree type look to it, like an evergreen, but it's paper. So I'm just going to glue that on all the way around. The painting is done. And I'll photograph these at the end so that you can actually really see what they look like with all the ribbon and everything included. And I have these little sprigs of holly that I have had for some time. I think they're vintage, but they still make stuff like that. This is that antique silk ribbon that I used in all the other ones that I made that were not paintings. And I'm just doing it in a similar way, but I'm going to put some holly on the front of it because there's holly in the painting, and because I like it. There. Okay, that's done. And I'll get to the other one. I will slow down so that you can see these eventually. So don't get frustrated. Now, what I decided to do with this is this sort of gunmetal gray color that the other ones are that are like that because they're antiques and they were used. I've decided to paint this metal one that has the shiny stainless steel metal, the whole thing, so it matches the others. And so I matched the paint, and I'm just painting it and then letting it dry. This is the next day. And now, because that little oil painting is done with the house, I'm going to glue some of this other type of pipe cleaner around it that has a little bit of brown in it to match this particular one. It's a little lighter green. And I'm just going around and doing that. Now with the glue gun, getting that in place. And I'm going to put a newer ribbon on this one. It's going to be green. The red just didn't look right to me. So I'll just tie a nice little bow and glue that on. And I just used floral wire to tie it, and then I put a little piece around it, and I'm going to slow it down here so you can see. And I put some ivy and some holly on this one. So it's the holly and the ivy picture with the house. And there's a little bit of paper ivy and some holly. My favorite song is The Holly and the Ivy. So that's what this one's about. And that's finished. And I will have a different photograph of this that includes all the ribbon at the end. And that's what it looks like close up. And here's the birds, and you can see the gold. I just stopped it so you could take a look. And this one has the mica on it on the inside. And it looks prettier, you know, in real life. The photo doesn't really capture that mica glistening. Well, thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.